Joining me right now, my friend, I've known him for a while, Roger Stone. And Roger, welcome to the program. I have to tell you right now, before we say anything else, I'm wearing a Panama Jack hat because I felt like, I don't know, I felt like being Miami today. And I know that you have similar such hats. And I thought of you when I put it on my head this morning. So I wanted to lay that on the tape. You're inspiring my headwear.
Excellent. I love it.
There you go. So tell me about this. You've made news. You've been in the news the last couple of days because you said that you wanted to organize a Day of Rage. Is that, I don't know if that's what it's officially called or if that's what it's been named by the media, but you said that you wanted to organize a Day of Rage at the Republican convention. And then in a recent interview, you were discussing making available, and I know it's already public, but making available the delegates where they're going to be staying, these Republican delegates, where they're going to be staying in hotels and visiting them. That sounds a little ominous. What's going on there?
No, there's nothing ominous about it at all. It is actually very traditional. Look, I think that the nomination should go to the person who gets 50% of the vote in the first ballot. And if that's a candidate other than someone that I'm for, I respect that. That's how the process works. This ain't horseshoes. It's not about getting close. It's not about being the overwhelming favorite. It's about getting 50%. And I have urged Trump supporters, rank and file folks, to come to Cleveland for peaceful demonstrations and a rally and protests outside the delegations, particularly the hotels where we think stealing has or is going on. Let me stress, I have never advocated violence or anything of the kind. That comes from the left. That comes from the freaks at Media Matters for America. Oh, yeah. By the way, it's perfectly all right for George Soros to finance quidlings to go to Trump rallies to foment violence, but when we have an Alinsky-style protest, they merely denounce it. But what's more disturbing to me, Dan, is I learned yesterday that I have now been banned from MSNBC.
I read that. I saw that headline.
So I did an interview with Bloomberg News, Bloomberg Television, with Mark Halpern and John Heilman, two respected political journalists. And it was supposed to air later through some agreement they had with MSNBC, but Soviet style, they edited out this interview, so it didn't air. Now, I don't know whether MSNBC is banning me because I am politically incorrect, or whether because I happen to be for Donald Trump, or maybe they're just banning me because I'm better dressed than any of their anchors. But for some reason, MSNBC has decided to throw out the First Amendment to trample on free speech rights.
What's MSNBC? I mean, you can't be surprised, Roger. It's MSNBC.
Well, here's the key thing, and you and I both know it. No one is watching. No one. They're losing money hand over fist. On any given time, there are more people watching Alex Jones than watching MSNBC. So,
let me ask you about
it's their loss, in my view. I kind of like the people that work there. But the arrogance of this, the arrogance of it, that the folks at MSNBC and CNN who did this earlier, that they can decide what we hear and what we shouldn't hear. It really smacks of Soviet-style censorship.
Now, who, as far as the demonstrations at the RNC, who was it that named it a Day of Rage? Was that Media Matters?
No, I took that because it is and it was hashtag Days of Rage. People will be very angry if this nomination goes to someone who didn't run for president.
You can see how that might undercut the peaceful intention that you have when it's called Days of Rage.
If somebody wanted to cast false asparagus on this, sure, but it's a famous phrase from the '68 convention. There's no place in my comments ad nauseum where I advocated violence. But I do think there's strength in numbers, and I do think it's important that people come to Cleveland to let their voice be heard.
Now, having never been a delegate, and I like watching the process. I myself have no interest in ever public office. I don't like sharing with people or being nice. But I like to watch the process from the periphery. So when you go and you visit, because I know that delegate lists, they're already made public, unless, if it's a little bit more difficult if they're larger parties, but they're already made public, staying at different hotels and that. What is the intention if you encourage people to go and find delegates and you tell people where they're staying and maybe what their room numbers or et cetera are? What are you expecting to happen there? I mean, how is that? I mean,
dialogue. I'm expecting dialogue. If I were from let's say Arizona, and I know that Donald Trump overwhelmingly won the Arizona primary,
right.
And I knew that the delegates who were sitting in those seats through chicanery by the state party were not Trump supporters, then I would want to find out what hotel the Arizona delegation is staying in and go there and talk to the Arizona delegates.
What do you say to the people though who, because I've heard this from a lot of different folks, even from a lot of the grassroots that have been on the ground in different states, and these are the people that have been there in the trenches long before these primaries. What do you say to the people though who say, well, part of the problem that we have with the delegate, the way that this is going so far, is that in some of these states Trump has not had a good apparatus left behind to make sure that people who are favorable to his campaign or people who support him, that they are elected to the slate that's going to be sent to Cleveland coming up. And in some of these states, he didn't have anybody there to represent him. And I've had people call into my program, Roger, and they were like, look, we've been here, and people email and they say he did not have hardly any representation. He did not have anybody from his campaign that he had left here to make sure that this happened. Some people say that it's a lack of preparation on his campaign's part, not so much trickery.
I think that's entirely valid criticism. The Trump campaign was built on a really novel and I think in some ways ingenious, totally communications-based strategy. In other words, Trump went and did these big rallies, and they got wall-to-wall network coverage, and they got huge local coverage. And then he did the debates, which obviously got huge viewership. And then he obviously does as many interviews per day as he possibly can. It has been completely free media driven. His campaign in the states is virtually non-existent in many states. And in the states where it is existent, it is run by people with no political experience whatsoever and no knowledge of how this process works. Now, whether Trump's campaign is able to retool quickly enough for the trench warfare aspect of this campaign, where Trump is facing the united Romney, Bush, Ryan, Cruz forces, the establishment globalist forces, these people know the rules. Believe me, they know the rules well. They know every trick in the book. They did it to Ron Paul at the convention, a little over 3 years ago. So it's a valid criticism. And if the Trump people don't retool quickly, they're going to lose a bunch of delegates. It's a valid criticism. But it does not remove the fact that delegates should reflect the will of the people in the state where they were chosen and where the people have voted.
Now, he's getting ready to embark on a series of policy speeches in some of these states that are going to be very competitive as well, where he's going to get into not just his immigration policy, but some of the other parts of his platform. Is he going to stay focused on this? Is he going to stay message focused as he was in the beginning of his campaign? Because he seemed to get more freewheeling as his campaign went on. And I think now in the last couple of weeks, he's realized he needs to get back to those core messages that had been resonating with people. Is that what the plan is, to kind of reconfigure his communication strategy?
Well, it's a little hard for me to tell you what the plan is because I stress again that I have no formal nor informal role.
We know.
No. Look, in all honesty, if I had great influence, I think the things would be running quite differently.
I was going to say, I think if you were officially with the campaign, it would be.
I have been a critic of the current campaign leadership. So I think this is a good idea. I wish he had done it earlier. I don't know who is going to help him prepare these remarks, but I've always thought it was more important for him to flesh out more of his views on the big issues that have brought his campaign to the forefront: trade, the economy, terrorism, immigration, obviously, and our current fiscal situation, which is, let's face it, abysmal.
All right. Last quick question for you before we let you go. The rumors that we hear about a possible Paul Ryan. Do you? He's said a million times that he would not consider running if it came to where a decision couldn't be made at the convention, and someone would suggest as a way of unifying someone like Paul Ryan, which seems to me pretty far fetched because you have you have a very populist candidate, you have a conservative candidate. They're both not really so much in line with Republican leadership. And then for anybody to suggest somebody like Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, seems to be completely antithetical to everything voters were going for towards either candidate. How much stock do you put in that rumor?
Well, I think there are a handful of the kingmakers who would like to do that. Although I must tell you, if Trump is not nominated on the first ballot, I don't believe that Ted Cruz will be nominated on the second, third, or fourth. I do think that you will find a shift to a candidate picked by the kingmakers. This is why I think John Kasich is hanging around. And by the way, I disagree with Donald Trump on this strongly. Kasich has every right to stay in this race. He had the courage to run in the primaries. He has some delegates. And I actually think Trump benefits from split opposition.
Now, Trump thinks that he's taken away from him.
Believe that if Kasich got out, those votes would more likely go to the new establishment candidate, Cruz.
He seems to think Kasich is pulling from him.
Yeah, I just don't see any. Well, I think that is true. They would go to Ted Cruz because they're establishment Republicans, and Ted has become the Bush candidate.
Oh, I don't know if he's. You and I disagree on that one. I don't think that he's become establishment. I think
let
we disagree on that.
Let me ask you a simple question. Neil Bush defrauded American voters of $1.5 billion in an S&L fraud. Why would you have him on your finance committee? Why? Well,
I'm not sure. Well, we could ask why. We could ask why John Sweeney's working on why Trump hired Sweeney just now. I mean, there's a million different ways that we could go with this. I bet he's not establishment. They hate his guts. They hate Trump's guts. They don't like either of them.
No, they like Ted's policies, like TPP, for example.
Well,
they don't
he
like
wasn't
him personally.
He's for TPA, not TPP. Well, I don't know about globalists. I think we disagree on that because there was TPA and TPP, and one Cruz had supported and one he did not. The latter of which was TPP. But I think we'll disagree on that one. But I know that I know you're going to be involved at the RNC. I may even see you up there. But we'll see how all of that goes. Honestly, though, I will say this: I hope that it doesn't get to a point. I think you and I agree on this. It doesn't get to a point where you have brokers up there who are going to just suggest someone that hasn't been tested by the populace in this primary point, because that would be that. I mean, that's a way to burn the Republican Party down.
I don't disagree with any of that. And Dana, we'll keep a seat for you at the rally in Cleveland. Come on out.
Oh, there we go. Look at that. See, I'm going to tell you what I can. If you can convince Donald Trump to maybe, I don't know, deport Nickelback or men who wear skinny jeans, we can talk.
I bet he doesn't even know who Nickelback is.
It's always good talking with you, Roger. Roger Stone. Always a pleasure, my friend. Take care.
Many thanks.
Take care.